You're live.
And we are Tuesday, March 10th, and this is Senate Transportation Committee, and we have someone new from the Transportation Agency, and why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what your job is, and so we'll know who you are when you're sitting on our bench.
Thank you. Good morning, I'm Amy Tatko. I'm the Director of Communications and Public Outreach. And my responsibility at the agency is to handle all of the external and internal communications. And so that includes, of course, all of our press inquiries, our press releases, social media posts, and our paid communication campaigns.
And the highway signs.
I actually do not get to do that, right?
No.
The most fun component is not actually in my shop.
Did you at one point? I thought you testified
No,
on
that's
that.
always been in the highway safety
Okay.
team. Yeah, yep.
Maybe we just asked you about it.
I'm often asked
And how
about
many
it.
years have you been?
I just had my 7-year anniversary, so this is my first and only so far position with the state. And our paid communications right now are focused on Drive Well Vermont, our highway safety behavioral change program, and also on the rail trails, the 4 rail trails that we own and manage. We have a pretty robust outreach program to promote those. And then internally, I work very closely with our civil rights team because they have a team of outreach ambassadors to support recruitment and to promote the agency, particularly the maintenance and highway positions. But I also try to carve out time to do what I can just to keep a positive focus on the great people who work at the agency and the projects and programs that they're doing. So we have a quarterly program called Inside AOT, where I interview someone for an hour over the lunchtime as others just kind of listen and then ask questions at the end. And that's a really nice spotlight to put on our people. And then recently we started AOT News, which is our newsletter. It's short and sweet, just a couple of pages with a lot of photos and a little bit of text to highlight all the good work that's being done. So that's what brings me here today. Michelle had the idea to do the March issue on the legislative process, you know, what the focus has been so far this session, where we are in the process, and you know, the key players at AOT who spend their time here working with all of you. So thank you.
And is that an internal newsletter? Or
It is internal, yeah. It's emailed to the whole agency, and I would be happy to share this issue with all of you. Yeah.
We were hoping for all of them, but we
All
got
of
this next issue. We'll be-
Well, I believe you can access SharePoint.
Sometimes.
Only our own
Depends.
SharePoint, not your
Yeah.
SharePoint, I don't think.
Okay. Well, we do have an archive, and I'd be happy to share former issues if you'd like to see them.
Oh, I mean, we could be signed up for it, you know, going
Going
forward.
forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep, we can make that happen.
Thank you so much.
Sure, thank you.
Damien did hand out, and the document you have is based on the our second attempt, not the bill that went out, but the strike all amendment. And I did speak with the chair of finance and tell her that here's what our intention was, and so they're going to go through in finance the amendment, not the bill itself. In that, so we should have that taken care of. And today we are talking about mileage-based user fee, and I'm hoping that we can. We're going to understand what we need to do for January, and provoke a conversation about what going forward in the future might look like for MBUF and mileage. And we're going to spend a lot of time this week on that. So, Patrick, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Patrick Murphy, State Policy Director, the Agency of Transportation. I'm just waiting for.
Oh, I know this, yeah.
I did sign in for the. Okay. It's working as well as that clock.
did you figure out that clock yet?
I'm close.
You're close. Got a lot of technical challenges.
Only,
this
only
morning.
12 hours away.
It'll be right. once.
Deserves my full attention.
Oh.
It says this meeting is scheduled for tomorrow.
Well, you have to come back then.
Did you also assign the sections? Did you, is that, was that a handout? Did I get?
But, we'll redo, I'll redo it and Megan will get it out to you.
Okay.
Okay, I sent you another one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You're where?
I'm 23 till the end, is my understanding, so I think that would make me now.
I think you were the only one that got sections.
I know.
We didn't.
Yeah, I think I have all the.
Let me do that and I'll have Megan send it out first thing this afternoon.
Okay. So, what I'll do today is just kind of, you did get a presentation from UDM Transportation Research Center, who is the group that worked with the agency on providing the analysis and recommendation for a mileage-based user fee rate. But I'll just go through quickly again for you all how we came to that and what we're trying to do, and then Damien is here to walk through the draft that's been shared with the House. There are definitely things that, you know, will be changed within the existing draft, but to give you a sense of the overall framework of what you'll be seeing in a couple of weeks. So the starting point for this is the intent language that you all approved last year in Act 43, the transportation bill, to get to the point where you have electric vehicles paying roughly what an average gas vehicle is paying in the state of Vermont. And so what I wanted to do is provide some context for that. So take it in 4 different Ford 150s, one of the more popular vehicles in the state of Vermont. One from 2013 when the gas tax was last updated, and then 3 from 2025, the most recent model. And so all have the very, similar impact upon the roadway network, but paying very different amounts. In 2013, the Ford 150 was paying about $270 based on the fuel economy of that model year, and then that sort of updated version in 2025 was paying just $185. So you can see just the increase in fuel efficiency of the same exact vehicle has led to a dramatic decrease on a per vehicle basis of particular models. The hybrid version of that is closer to what the actual average fleet economy is, 23 miles into the gallon. And so it's paying about $153. And that's roughly what, so $89 is the infrastructure fee. That's what the electric version of Ford Lightning is paying. But what we're trying to do is to bring these electric vehicle models into closer parity with the average vehicle, the average gas vehicle. So we proposed a rate based on UVM Transportation Research Center's recommendation of 1.4 cents per mile. originally, in our 2024 implementation plan, legislative report, we had a rate of 1.78 cents per mile, and that had included administrative costs, which are higher for a mileage-based user fee, and included, it was based upon a fuel efficiency of the fleet back in 2013 when the gas tax was last updated. In effect, trying to recoup what has been lost in the past decade plus. But the UVM TRC had made some good arguments about why, the proposal that they've made has been more aligned with what the legislature had sought last year with its language, and so we proposed 1.4 cents per mile.
Is there a reason that you based it on the truck?
Yeah.
Not on a higher mileage?
No, it's just to give you, it's not based on a truck. Just to be
Based on
clear.
23 miles per gallon.
It's based on 20, it happens to align with this particular truck.
Why not do it with the average pleasure car and feature?
It is 23.
23 is.
Yeah, it's just a coincidence that it aligned with this model. But
Well, did you,
in the report that UVM submitted,
Okay.
they found the distance weighted average fuel economy was 23 miles per
The
gallon.
distance weight,
Yeah,
not just all the registered vehicles, and take their sticker MPG and averaging that.
yeah.
Would that be higher, I assume? But I don't know.
It would probably be slightly higher, maybe like 23.7 miles per gallon, but when you factor in how the vehicles are actually used, which is based on real registration and odometer data that they look through, that's where you get the 23 miles per gallon.
And I assume every year it goes up, just as newer vehicles, more efficient vehicles.
That's right, yeah. So back in 2013, it was about 19 miles per gallon.
So I know you had a question,
Go ahead.
but then I have a question.
Oh, no, it was just, I found the answer.
So,
It's in the report.
so are we proposing to change the, amount annually? The, fee?
So the language that was approved by the legislature is to sunset the infrastructure fee for battery electric vehicles upon implementation of a mileage-based user fee.
But would the MBUF
So-
amount change according to some metric each year?
Yeah, so we're gonna get to
Okay.
to that. That has also been a part of the recommendation.
Okay.
Is to have
Indexing it.
Yeah, yeah.
inflation adjustment.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, I appreciate you running through this. I know that you've been spending a lot of time in the house on it, so if there's any commentary about the house's reaction and how likely the actual language is, if that's a part of your presentation today, that would be helpful as well. Because although I fully follow where you are on this and the process of events that led us to this recommendation, I want to understand what the changes were or concerns you heard in the house as well at some point.
So, Damien has drafted language.
Yep.
The language that, he has drafted will reflect what they're doing.
Okay.
And I did ask them because the House has had one meeting on this, and
Okay.
they haven't put it on the table.
Okay.
But I asked them as soon as they know what is being proposed, that in my mind, give me a side-by-side of
Yeah.
what's there and what's that.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. So there is already, we're going to get some kind of proposal with all of this from the House is the most likely outcome.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
But they've only had one meeting
Okay.
on this.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So this is just to provide some for, an average gas vehicle is paying. So in the state of Vermont, we're very much in the middle of the pack in terms of our gas taxes, and pretty much in line with a lot of New England states that surround us. I've just noted New York and Connecticut.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, love that. New York, that was
Yeah.
great.
Say which part again?
You're getting closer all the time. The New York part.
So, at any rate, so New Hampshire, New York, Connecticut, they're all paying less in gas taxes than the state of Vermont, but both New York and Connecticut have this sales taxes in addition to it. So effectively, their tax rate is higher. So it's
I
just
see.
a note. So although, and this ranking of 24th is based on just that simple
Gotcha.
excise tax and not the sales tax. So actually, it's kind of further off in the middle. At any rate,
But does this include our TIB?
sorry.
This includes the TIB
Yeah,
portion?
so
which
this is the full, 32 cents roughly. On the other hand, in much of the country, there are not charging fees at EV charging stations. So this is the kind of frame, one of the questions that did come up in the House committee is around border travel, interstate travel, and the fairness of applying a mileage-based user fee on all miles traveled in a given year. So with the gas vehicle, you have gas taxes in other states. So you're still paying some amount of gas tax, whether it be in Vermont or New Hampshire or Quebec or wherever. You don't have that same dynamic with EVs. So you're not necessarily paying, unless you make it all the way down to Pennsylvania, you're not necessarily paying a EV charging tax or per kilowatt hour tax in other states. And so there really, right now, in this moment that we're in, isn't much of a danger of the double taxation. And here again is a sense of the average cost to charge within the country, and Vermont is, on the lower side within the New England states, but definitely compared to New Hampshire, but very much within the average.
This is
cost.
public or? at home?
This is at public charging stations, yeah.
And so it includes those taxes for those that have them. But this isn't the tax, this is the total, so that
This is
includes
the
the tax.
total. This is the total cost, yeah. So it would include any taxes.
So they're regulated and can only charge this, is that,
No, this is just an average
on average? Okay, so some
of what it
are
costs
higher.
to charge in these different places.
Can they, no, but so in Vermont, can they charge what they want to charge?
Yes.
So it's.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Do we know what the range is of those?
Depends on what you're talking about, whether it's level 1 charging, level 2 charging.
Well, level 3 is what I would be interested in.
Level 3 charging, that might be anywhere from, like 35 cents up to 60 cents per kilowatt hour.
Do we have a way of knowing what they're doing, or do we have to go and check?
Weights and Measures regulates it. They're doing a whole entire thing on it right now.
But I don't know if they
So
capture the cost.
I think that,
Weights and Measures doesn't regulate the price.
yeah, but they do know the price. They take a price per kilowatt hour, right? Isn't that the whole point of the report you're doing?
Weights and Measures has to verify that the price is displayed properly, so on a per kilowatt hour basis, and that all the fees are properly
And that
displayed.
a kilowatt hour is being dispensed.
Yeah, and it's more, Weights and Measures, more about the measure of the electricity actually being dispensed.
But we don't know what they're charging.
Do we know what gas stations
So
they're
we
charging?
do, I mean,
Yeah.
Like well, do we?
So the price has to be clearly displayed, and that is one of the things that is covered by the regulations.
Displayed to the customer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so that's sort of a, something that
Just
Weights and
something.
Measures would be checking. And then for all of the charging stations that have been deployed by the state and will be deployed by the state using our NEVI funds and other funds, we have price controls in place.
Okay,
So
right. No,
They have
ours-
to submit, what their price is going to be, and then if they intend to raise it, above inflation, they would have to request that.
For how long? For how long? Is that just part of their grant agreement or is it in
That's-
perpetuity?
Yeah, that's in perpetuity, so it's a part of the contract for, the,
So just
6
from
or
a
7
high
years.
level, remind me how many charging stations are out there that are we subsidized versus,
So to date, we're in the process of a couple of others, but to date, we only have one operational charging site that's in Bradford, but there are several in progress in Randolph and other places.
But those are the ones that the state does, but I mean, there's 3 massive banks of chargers, private chargers in my town alone. I mean, Tesla, right, and which has doubled, and then there's 2 others.
There's a great map by Drive Electric Vermont that
Yeah, and I hope those are accurate. That might be our best data source.
and so the average at, the 0.325, it's just flat, that's what they get showed, their charge, not, and there's and then that includes the 6% sales tax.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm questioning the inclusion of the slide, but, this is really just to drive home that, the average EV driver is paying roughly the same amount whether they're traveling in, within Vermont or, in border states. And there aren't these, per kilowatt hour fees outside of Vermont, until you get to a place like Pennsylvania. This is just going back to comparisons that you've seen between the different programs that you've heard from. Where we ended up in terms of 1.4 cents per mile. Utah is now lower at 1.1 cents, but had been 1.5 cents per mile. They lowered it because they have a voluntary program and they were trying to encourage more people to enroll. But they started off at 1.5 cents. Oregon is at 2 cents and was proposing to increase that. Hawaii, we've talked about, is at just a fraction of a cent. They also have the ability to, for their regional DMVs to also apply a mileage-based user fee. So although the gas tax is much lower at about 18, 19 cents per gallon in Hawaii for the state, their regional gas taxes bring that effective tax rate to almost, I think, 40 cents per gallon. And then Virginia was at about 1.9 cents per mile. So again, pretty well in the middle towards the lower end of fees for electric vehicles. This is to give a sense of, if you traveled a big chunk of your time outside the state in New Hampshire, what would be the real difference in annual payment versus someone who just traveled within the state of Vermont? So on the average, going back to these Ford 150s, you'd maybe be paying, 185 in Vermont only, but 167, so just a minor difference. if you travel like 40% of your time in New Hampshire on the border. Although, you know, if you were traveling in the state of New York where you have taxes that are actually higher, you'd be paying slightly less as an EV than an average gas vehicle in that area. So it's, you know, you'll give some a little on the border, you'll get some in other parts of the state. And it's very much like how the gas tax is right now, where people might fill up in one state, drive in another, and it's more fluid than you might expect at the border.
And why 11,000 miles? Is that the average, 11,000 miles? I thought we were higher.
So when it's, yeah, we're at about 11,000. And when you take into account a lot of the less fuel efficient vehicles, they tend to drive many fewer miles. And so that kind of brings the average
So
down.
for all pleasure cars, it's 11,000 miles is the average.
So this is the, and I've included, again, on your site, just the 2-pager that UVM developed. So you don't have to go back to the 40-page report. But this is taken from that and is looking at instead of just taking, because the gas tax can fluctuate on a number of different factors, it's taking a 5-year average of that gas tax. And then, as I said before, looking at the distance weighted average for light duty vehicles of the fuel economy, which is 23 miles to the gallon.
And then did you talk on your slide that had the caps? Did you talk about that? Was I not paying attention? About the RUC cap that some states have, and I assume NA means we don't have a cap, not that it's not. It's not applicable because we don't have one.
Because we're not proposing one. Yeah.
And did you talk about why you are not proposing one?
So, yeah, we did talk about that, but we can talk about it again. So, you know, all these other programs are, or have been voluntary. And even Hawaii's is still voluntary. The caps have been used in a way to try to encourage more vehicles to participate in the miles-based user fee by ensuring that a vehicle doesn't pay any more than a certain amount. But I can go.
Yeah, that's fine.
I can show a different slide that basically visually, you know, what it does for the revenue projections. If you put a cap in place,
Right.
effectively anybody driving or expected to drive more than the average or wherever the cap is set,
Right.
would choose that over a mileage-based user fee. So that's the difference that we really learned from these other states in implementing a mandatory program from the start. So this is the language, and Damien will walk through it in a little bit, but of how we get to the per mile calculation. And then addressing Senator Harrison's question, we're also proposing an inflation adjustment on an annual basis. What makes the most sense to us because of what is really driving the costs within our transportation program is the National Highway Construction Cost Index, which is managed by FHWA, and it's based on real cost data that state DOTs face. So it's not just based on, you know, a sample basket of goods, it's actual contracts and the markups and everything else that happens in the solicitation process. So we feel that it's an accurate representation of what the real costs are that are being experienced by the agency. That's been about, UVM actually based their projections that you all had seen in the report and the policy brief on this index, which was, I think the average was 4% in the past year.
Your box there, do sales tax automatically change the prices if the price doesn't change? I mean, you're saying it doesn't need that, the EV charge would have to be manually increased by an index?
Well, if like a sales tax, if the cost of something is rising, then it's naturally,
Right. What if it doesn't rise?
then you're not adjusting.
And do you think it should be if the price doesn't rise?
Do I think
What should be adjusted manually if the price doesn't rise over a 20-year period, 10-year period, 5-year period?
if the cost of construction doesn't rise?
No, the cost of the fuel. So what I think you're saying in that box, tell me if I'm wrong, is saying because gas tax is connected to the price, or at least part of it, not by the gallon, that it doesn't need to be adjusted.
No, I'm not making an argument one way or the other about adjustment of the gas tax. It's just, that, you know, the gas tax mainly is not a sales tax, and so there's no way
Right.
for it to adjust.
Right.
I mean, there's a
Just a small part.
portion of it, but, so, you know,
I thought this was to make the argument of why the EV 1.4 cents needs to be indexed.
no. It's, you know, the reality is that we expect much of the fleet to transition over the next several decades towards electric. And so, you know, what we've shown in our transportation funding study was that just the gas tax indexing as a measure does not provide a lot of benefit over time, because you still have that same dynamic of, you know, you're taxing fewer and fewer gallons of gas because of increased fuel efficiency. And so, you're going to see a decline even as the price increases. But that dynamic is not true for miles-based user fee, where it will increase over time because you've got.
So, but
more and more.
you are recommending to index the user.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this index versus just a general index, like an inflation, that's what.
This is what we're proposing.
Yeah, I think those really, discrete indexes are helpful. I mean, there's a solid waste one. You just have to hope that the government keeps making them, or
Well,
calculating them.
Yeah, and Damien's added language in here that, you know, the National Highway Cost Construction
Yeah,
Index
Or-
or the successor index, however it might change.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I like this selection of your options that you've chosen for indexing. My main issue, and I feel like I'm a broken record on this, is if you look at it, we're not gonna get the money we need unless we also index the gas tax at the same time we're doing this. And so you're not making that suggestion.
Is that a question?
Yes.
Okay, no, we're not making that.
Yes, so is there any, so I guess that's where I'm a no, like, that's just where I'm gonna be a no on this, is like, it just doesn't logically make sense to add an index to a tax for a specific demographic of drivers to fill a gap when we're not doing that for the majority of drivers. You know, I don't think that's a fair taxation policy, to index one subsection and not the other, and then expect that index, which this is like, if we're thinking of the Goldilocks of what the index options were, this is like the middle porridge, if I remember from Logan's presentation. This isn't the highest possible index, but to not also suggest that feels disingenuous to a lot of climate work we've done as well. So I have a lot of strong thoughts about that. And although I agree generally with your selection of the indexing, and I think that's the correct outcome based on the UVM report we got, they also still suggested that we index the gas tax, and that's not here. So do you see a world in which you would be able to propose a type of index for the gas tax in this language?
Well, I'm not the governor, and I'm, basing a recommendation off of what the legislature asked us to propose back to you. And,
Yes, but like you're going off of their report and you're saying, we're doing this all because we have their report from UVM and they made these suggestions and that's why we're doing it, but you're missing out on one of the biggest parts of their report.
Well, I
So-
don't think we are. If you take the graph that you're holding up,
Yeah, with no mileage fee and indexing, we
and
would
you
be
look
even.
at, and so there's multiple scenarios there. And
Yeah.
what is the second highest scenario?
On top of having
That's
no mileage
generating
fee.
revenue over time, it's a mileage fee for battery electric vehicles indexed.
Yeah, that
For a couple of
percentage would go down if you didn't index. So that's built, my understanding of the report, and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, so please correct me, is that money, that getting us up to $55 or so million of revenue is built off of if there was no mileage fee and we indexed. If that's not correct, then you're looking at only 35, maybe I'm misunderstanding it. I'm truly this is a lot of information in context, so I'm not trying to be adversarial if it's a true misunderstanding. But it seems like with no mileage fee, indexing is what they're building off of. So you're only gonna get 35 million or something if you're. I might be misunderstanding, so I'm sorry. Oh, that's important.
So I don't know if you can see this.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly what I'm
Okay.
looking at.
So just so everyone is understanding what we're talking about here, this chart is looking at multiple scenarios. One is if we didn't have any mileage fee at all.
Yeah.
The second least is if we just had a mileage fee for battery electric
What's
vehicles.
the y-axis? Revenue?
This is revenue in millions
Okay.
in 2023 dollars. The third is if we had a mileage fee for all. Then we have, if we have just no mileage fee, but the gas tax per index.
Yes.
The second highest here in terms of revenue generation over time, because it is looking at how the fleet changes over time. And this is based on the federal model, the MOVES model that was designed with inputs prior to the Biden administration. So it was before there was any, of what had been proposed as much higher fuel efficiency standards, before NEVI, before federal tax credits and the rest of it. So it's based on a very conservative EV adoption scenario. That produces the second highest amount of revenue. That's mileage fee for battery electric vehicles indexed. And the reason is because although EV drivers are right now in the minority, and it's important to recognize that the fee is on vehicles and their impact to the road, not on drivers. But because the EVs right now are in the minority, doesn't mean it's going to be so in 10, 20, 30 years. And the expectation is that a huge part of the fleet will transition to electric over time. And so that's one piece of it.
Okay.
The second piece of it is that, indexing allows you to actually, contrary to, what happens with the gas tax if you index it, which goes down over time, it will still decline. It will maintain pace with inflation. And so that's a lot of what we've lost in the past decade plus is due to inflation, not just fuel economy. There's the electrification, which is probably about $2.5 million this year that we're losing. Fuel economy might be somewhere around $6 to $7 to $8 million that we're losing because of fuel efficiency that has changed since 2013. But then inflation is in the couple of dozens of millions. So we do think that indexing, what is going to become the system, and what the legislature itself has said, will become the system not just for electric vehicles, but for all vehicles, that starting now, in the beginning with an index, will be an important part of developing what we think is a sustainable transportation funding solution.
Yeah, I just won't, yeah, I'm just never gonna be able to vote for one specific index on an EV driver over an index gas tax being also in the conversation. It just doesn't make sense to me, because you act, so, and I understand your chart
What this
now,
chart
so,
shows
yes,
is
and
that,
I understand where I missed
that you would
it.
then be shooting yourself in the foot.
No, it doesn't show that,
Because
But
that,
what's not on here is if you did both. If you had
yeah,
an index mileage fee and an index gas tax. That's options.
yes, exactly. You would get, what, we're looking around 40 million with, it's about $40 million of, if we do just indexing without a mileage fee.
I'm saying if you don't adopt an index factor for the mileage-based user fee for electric vehicles, then over time you will see this much lower.
Yes, and I'm saying we need to do
Senator
both.
White is saying is do both.
Yeah, and are you open to that language? And your response was talk to the governor, basically, if I understood
That's
correctly.
not what the administration is proposing.
Okay, great.
That's right.
Let me ask this, and this is my simple-minded, is what we're doing now fair?
What we're doing now, fair? No. And that's why we propose something different. We have vehicles that aren't paying, what their fair share would be.
Maybe an infrastructure fee.
And so even at $89, if we go back to the first slide here, with a Ford 150, is this fair? Same exact vehicle. Roughly the same weight. If it's driven the same amount of miles, is it fair that, in 2013, it was paying $271, and now $185. And if you just compare vehicles in this time, is it fair that one vehicle is paying $185 and another $89?
Yeah, you can make the same argument though for a fuel efficient gas car that you're making about EVs though. Is it fair that I have a more fuel efficient vehicle? This is the most fuel efficient vehicle. So that's why most folks made the financial decision to purchase that vehicle, is the most fuel efficient, because it doesn't use that type of fuel.
But,
So I don't, it just,
what ultimately would be the fairest system that we could implement?
People are paying according to how they use the system.
Which would be vehicle miles traveled for everyone.
yeah, I would agree with that.
So from my point of view, what we're doing now is not fair. But the fairest system we could do is one where we set ourselves up to get to a place where everybody was vehicle miles traveled, and we were moving the Vermont fleet away from fuel taxes.
Right now, we don't have a fair system. We're trying to get to a fair system. But the fair system that you described, we can't get to right now. You have to take steps to do it. And so the first step is what we've outlined in multiple reports and what we've put into language now, is to start with what we know, with the group of vehicles that we know are not paying what they should be, that reflect the impacts on the roadway network. So that,
Just, I'm going to say from my vantage point, what I hear at the table is angst about the unfairness of the system on both sides, now and taking steps. But ultimately, the fairest thing that we could do is get everyone, to a vehicle miles traveled system.
Yes, and can I just raise, exactly, my concern is we're going to endeavor down this pathway. We're going to pressure EV drivers with an index cost going up, and gas drivers are not going to be paying more. So we're actually going to be in a situation where the cost is going up greater for EV drivers than it is for gas drivers. So it doesn't, and we're not going to make the switch to gas drivers in the course of time to actually right that ship. Like, we're not gonna, every plan I've seen that we've had states present to us, they aren't even at the gas vehicle side of things yet, for the most part. They're not there yet. And we're talking 5 to 10 years of development, and we haven't even rolled out a plan. So if we're gonna have 5 to 10 years of an MBUF program with an indexed fee on EV drivers and no change to the gas tax, that feels like a missed opportunity. And in fact, potentially costing EV drivers to hold the brunt of the lost revenue from the gas tax. So that's my main concern, is once we start to play with that lever, they're a very easy group for people to target as elitist, to target as wealthy, to use all of those things to raise that tax. Yeah, I just worry if we're not going to be doing these simultaneously, it feels not equitable. So I appreciate your calling everything.
Well,
That is my concern.
I certainly don't think where we are now is safe.
Yeah.
And the question is, over time, how do we get to a place that is fairer to everyone? Also recognizing that we do have a pretty significant portion of our gas tax that comes from out-of-staters. So how do we compensate for that in that? Go ahead.
And the other thing I just remembered about the model, it might have been before the NEVI funds and the increased tax credits, but it was probably based on clean cars and a requirement that manufacturers ramp up EV manufacturing pretty drastically.
No, because it's a national model. So it
Yeah,
wasn't,
well, that's a national, whatever, most states, California.
not most states. About
Well, enough
16,
states.
16 or 17 states.
Right.
So the model is, and we can, I think there will be testimony by UVM TRC, and you can ask the question, but I believe that national model is based on the EPA fuel efficiency standards for the country, not California's waiver for those.
Well, I would be surprised if they didn't include the California and the states that signed on to clean cars. That would be a pretty poor model if they did, since it's a large percentage of the population.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that it was done before Vermont had adopted advanced clean cars too, which would have had a much higher EV adoption
I
trajectory.
guess we'll have to ask them what those projections are.
Because we had these discussions as they were doing their work, and I was clear that what we didn't want was an optimistic scenario where, just there was 2035, everything was going to be EV sales. We wanted to make sure that it reflected where we are actually now, which is a completely different place than a couple of years ago.
Right.
And so that's why we instead went backwards to the moves model that was in place before a lot of the
Yeah, it'd be
changes.
interesting to see
Yeah.
what the model is for EV adoption in Vermont or other places.
Sure.
So also, this is an increased tax
Yes.
for these certain drivers, right? So if you're paying $89 now, your tax will go up. If we
Depending on how much you got.
if you on the average.
Yeah, if you drive on average, it will go up to about 154.
And the governor's okay with that tax increase.
Yeah, because I think it's, the argument that has been made is that, they're not now paying what the average gas vehicle is paying. That for many years, there weren't any taxes being paid into the transportation fund, at least through, you know, fuel taxes and mileage taxes. So, you know, we've got to a point where, you know, that, I think you all approved $89 for battery electric vehicles and $44.50 for plug-in hybrids, knowing full well that that is not, you know, necessarily what EVs are traveling on average and reflective of, you know, the full impacts to the roadway network. I think it was done at a lower rate because we didn't have the ability necessarily in 6 months' time to go and space those payments out. And that's been a key part of the mileage-based user fee is from the start, from our road usage charge study in 2021, is that we want people to be able to pay more in line with how people pay the gas tax. So not on one big payment that we've seen in other states that have been, you know, more punitive. You know, some several $100s right up front as a registration fee. We didn't want to go there. We want to be able, with the mileage-based user fee, to have people elect to pay on a frequency that they can fit within their budgets, which might mean monthly or quarterly, or even pay as you go. And so if we weren't able to do that with a flat fee, which is exactly why we didn't come to a flat fee in the first place through that study, because we felt that was unfair. That a mileage-based user fee was the fairer way to go because it's based on what people actually use of our public infrastructure.
The other point I would just raise that I really appreciated in the study is that they did break out, to your point, around like New Hampshire, New York. They did also break out if you're a driver in rural Vermont versus a driver in suburban or urban Vermont. The highest increased household looks to be the 2 electric vehicle household in rural Vermont, where they go from $178 to $400 in cost per year. So it seems counterintuitive to the years of work that we've done to promote rural electric vehicle driving, to then have them be the most directly increased group of people for their household budget. So I'm wondering if you could square a little bit of that.
So I want to be clear on this point, because when you look at, you know, who knows where gas taxes are today, but where they were at least yesterday, the gas tax is about roughly a tenth of what somebody might pay per gallon right now. So if you're paying $3.20 a gallon, it's going to be about 32 cents, a tenth of what people are paying. Every gallon of gas you don't buy, you're saving 9/10 of that gallon of gas, the cost of the gallon of gas. Whether you're in a, you know, fully electric vehicle, a plug-in hybrid, a hybrid, even a fuel-efficient vehicle. Every gallon of gas that you buy, you are saving 9/10 of that. And all we're saying is, instead of saving 10/10, you're going to pay that 1/10 of that gallon of gas to be able to pay for the roads that you're driving on. And that's really the point, is to get people up to paying roughly the same amount based on, you know, how they're actually using the infrastructure.
I guess what would be really helpful for me would be to help me feel comfortable with your proposal. I would need to see what would the index amount most likely be in 10 years, in 5 years, individually for the cost of folks. Because what I'm getting from the report tells me that it's going to be a substantial, $200 plus, a $222 increase for certain households. But I'm not going to see that increase for my constituents who have gas vehicles. So I need to understand, at what point does it become that we're actually charging EV drivers more than just 1/10? You know, so if there, and maybe
so you could maybe think about it in a different way. The JFO last spring presented on what is the current purchasing power of transportation fund dollars right now. So, you know, we're getting 32 cents to the gallon roughly, and they looked at, you know, how does that compare in 2025 dollars? How does that compare to years past? And so the last time the gas tax was updated in 2013, 14, If you look at it in 2025 dollars, it'd be about like 42 cents
Okay.
in terms of purchasing power. And then if you keep going, you have to go all the way to, before stock market crash in 1929 to find a point in time at which people are paying, less, than what they are now.
Yes, and that's why we should index the gas tax. Because wasn't that the whole argument that was made before, is you're paying a much lower percentage now than you ever were, since like the 1970s, isn't that the point?
That's what,
Yeah.
Logan has
So-
testified.
Yeah, so I would say that's even more so an argument for the gas tax to be indexed, but.
That's certainly your prerogative.
And your thing about saving 9/10 of the cost, because you're not buying the gallon of gas, but you're buying the electricity, so you're not saving, it's not like you're not paying that money.
Well, if you're in a hybrid, yeah, if you save a gallon of gas, then you're not paying for that gallon of gas.
Right, just a more efficient vehicle.
Yeah. But in terms of, yeah, I mean, you can look at it, I guess, if you take sort of Drive Electric Vermont's estimates of about, $1.50, $1.60 for the equivalent of a gallon of gas, then
You're charging.
you're saving 5/10 of a gallon, saving half the cost. But the point is you're saving, and you're also saving on federal gas tax that you're not paying, which is about half what you paid for the gas tax, in the state. So there's, when you actually compare what people are paying to, what people are paying in gas vehicles, it's, pretty significant.
Yeah, but one of the arguments why we were all sold electric vehicles was you were gonna not pay the gas tax, even as you're gonna pay less in cost for fuel over time. That's why you can pay a larger upfront cost for an electric vehicle. That was the argument that's been sold to many EV drivers. So I think for me to feel comfortable with this proposal, there's gonna be some work that needs to be done to put in place a clear understanding why there's not a negative impact that will happen specifically to this demographic of car driver. And especially since we've made a lot of promises to EV drivers as a state about the value and benefit of them moving in this direction. So it does feel like we need to support them as much as possible as we raise a tax on them, which seems to be an argument that's made in every other world except for with electric vehicle drivers.
Well, I guess I'll just say, at
And
this
then
point,
we're gonna begin to move
Oh.
on and get Damien up
Okay.
and present the language in the
I'll just wrap up, and, because I think it's being portrayed as we're proposing this on, one certain group of people.
Yeah.
I have one vehicle in my own household. It's an electric vehicle.
Okay.
I still want our road and bridge infrastructure to be maintained in a way that won't damage that vehicle. I also want the bus that I came in on this morning to be running on time and when I need it, so that vehicle can be used by other people in my household. So I understand what you're trying to say, but there are multiple goals here that we're trying to work away at. And my point is, when you're buying an electric vehicle, you are not only saving on emissions and everything else, but you're saving still on money, even though a fraction of that money that you're saving is going to go back into the infrastructure that we all need, whether you're an EV driver or a gas vehicle driver. So at that, I think I'll pass it over to Dan.
I think we should go through the language that has been presented.
That's a good. You got me there at the end, Patrick. That was good.
morning. For the record, I'm Damian Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So you all should have what is a rough draft of the mileage-based user fee proposal. So
I'm going to jump in and ask you before we get to that, just at a high level, because you drafted a lot of this language around us. Where are we? What will happen if we implement this in the piece? It's my recollection that, and I don't see this in the numbers that are presented, it's my recollection that when we implement this, that registration fee comes off. So just remind me of where we are and what the ground is that leads into this.
Okay. So the chair was referencing the current registration fees for pleasure cars. And so I'm joining the Zoom meeting now so I can show you the statute. But if you'll remember, what we call the EV infrastructure fee was set up as an interim while this was developed. So the language here provides, there it is. All right. So if we look down here, this is the current language, and it provides that in addition to the regular registration fee, there's an annual EV infrastructure fee for a battery electric vehicle equal to the amount of the annual fee collected for registration. So basically, you pay 2 times your annual registration fee. So if you get a 2-year registration, it's going to cost you $326 if you're driving an EV versus $163 for an internal combustion engine vehicle. If you are driving a plug-in hybrid, that's covered in C here, so it's 1/2 the annual fee. Your annual fee would be $89 for internal combustion. For a plug-in hybrid, you're adding another $44.50 to that. So you're up to $133.50, I think. And then with the biannual fee, it's $163 plus an additional $81.50. So you're up to $244.50. So that's the current structure here. We have this flat fee, and you pay that regardless of how much you drive. The way we've set it up in the statute amends that statute to repeal subsection B, which is the EV infrastructure fee, but leaves in the plug-in hybrid electric infrastructure fee upon implementation, because if you remember right, the above initially implements just for electric vehicles, and we haven't set out stages for what happens beyond that. And the way the effective date works is that amendments shall take effect on the effective date of the mileage-based user fee for pleasure cars that are battery electric vehicles. So if you implement the mileage-based user fee as proposed in this language for, say, next January 1st, on that, as of January 1st, the infrastructure fee would come off and the mileage-based user fee would come on. So any mileage-based user fee amounts you're thinking about, you should adjust that by registration fees will go down, but you'll have this mileage-based user fee replacing that. So it won't necessarily be a break-even scenario, but it's something that should be considered as you're calculating this amount. And I am not the person to project what it would be depending on how much you drive and so forth, but you could see some folks who drive less coming out ahead and some folks who drive more coming out behind. And so it'll be closer tied to how many miles you actually put on your electric vehicle. All right.
So I'm gonna just, and this you may not want to answer, but what it looks like to me is the legislature and, the transportation committees took a step on an unequitable system. And what's being proposed is another, step in a system.
I think that's a fair way to characterize the expressed intent and around the mileage-based user fee in the past bills. So this has evolved over several T-bills now, going back several years, where we started with no additional fee on EVs. And then there was the infrastructure fee imposed with a directive to the agency to begin working on mileage-based user fee. And now you have the mileage-based user fee proposal in front of you, and the intent was expressed as the mileage-based user fee would be the next step. And then I cannot remember if the language was in last year's T-bill that the intent was eventually the mileage-based user fee would apply to all vehicles. I think it was. I know there was a lot of debate over that language.
Well, I'm gonna just speak for myself, but, and we need to go into the proposal and see what, but for me, hearing all the concerns with this and not in this, what really isn't talked about is how do we ultimately get to the fairest system that we could put in place. And so I would personally like to see this committee have that as a discussion, that if this did come in as a step, do we see us getting, and what would it look like to get to a position where we're treating everybody equally? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I like this creative, solutions-oriented way of moving on this. I was very grateful for the language that we put in, and we did do it last year with they talked about it in the UVM study. In section 18, the interim step towards gradually expanding to all vehicles. I would like very strong language, if possible, in any draft that we do that calls out what is an interim, what exactly is the interim step, how long is that interim step, and when do we get to all vehicles? That would provide me with assurances that this isn't just going to be a drawn out increased EV tax. So is there a way in the language, and we're going to get it from the House, so I don't know what we're doing with this right now. We're not necessarily going to make recommended changes to you, but if I wanted to draft language that had specific dates, that it must be all vehicles by 2030, it must be all vehicles by whatever date, is that something that fits in with that language, or how?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that is a policy consideration for all of you as to how you want to implement this. The process of drafting it, once you agree on the basic structure for the mileage-based user fee, as I go through this with you, you'll see that what it really comes down to for the structure of the fee itself is which vehicles does this apply to? And as you change, you can update that in steps, you can update that all at once. So it can go any number of steps. You can go battery electric vehicles to just plug-in electric vehicles, which would include plug-in hybrids, to all pleasure cars, to all motor vehicles, or you can just go straight to all motor vehicles or any other steps like that. And then you can add in exemptions. For example, we have exemptions for off-road use of diesel. So you may want to include exemptions like that. So there are various ways to create exemptions in here, or to create staggered language. And we've done that in lots of other legislation over the years, where we show this is where we want to get to, initially, and then we've set a timeline to get to, point you know, B or C or D, down the road.
Is there also a way you could put in, because I think the cap idea, although not proposed by AOT, is something that I would like to explore, especially if we're indexing it and then we're gonna surpass what a gas driver is basically being charged eventually. Could you create a cap in the language where that could never happen, where the cost would never, like, if it got to a point where it went over what what the gas tax users are paying, that
So-
it would cap it?
With caps, there are a couple different ways to draft it. You've seen some of the other states put a dollar cap on your maximum fee. So that's certainly something that could be done fairly easily. But there are policy arguments for and against that. With the inflator, we frequently cap the inflator. So for example, the minimum wage is the increase in the CPI or 5%, whichever is less. So when you have, like we did a few years ago where inflation was really high, there was that insurance piece there for business owners, knowing that the minimum wage that they would have to pay their employees was only going to go up by 5%.
Yes, that's kind of, that would give me some comfort if we could develop some kind of language like that, and maybe I'll talk to my house, my folks over there, my compatriots.
Yeah, so there are different ways to do that, and there are probably variations on that too. Those are just two that come.
And in the
off
language, is there a way to separate out indexing at all, like the way that they have it? Could we not index the EMBA?
That it's a policy decision for you.
Okay.
So whether
But
you
it's all-
index it or not. So for example, our gas tax currently is not indexed, although it does vary a bit based on the per gallon cost. And again, I'm not the best person to talk about how that whole mechanism works. But you could make the decision to start indexing that. Currently it doesn't index for inflation, but it does relate a little bit to the per gallon cost. You can always make the decision to index or not index this. You can also adjust what you index it by.
Yeah,
So the agency has proposed the NHCCI, which is tied to state highway construction costs. So, and that's, you know, so that seems to tie into what are you collecting this to use it for, you know, and what does the transportation fund go towards, but that doesn't mean that you have to use that inflator or index.
We put a floor and a ceiling on the tip, right? For the whole, just the tip. Okay.
And you can do that too.
Yeah.
There are a variety of ways to kind of approach this. You can set minimum amounts of the fee, and then between this amount, you can also have the fee, you know, if you think about truck registration rates, they change as the truck gets heavier and heavier. There are a variety of ways to approach this, but some of the questions though for you as policymakers are what is going to be, you know, understandable for the public, administratively feasible, and makes sense for, you know, the T-fund in the way that, you know, and provides the sort of support that you want us to provide for the T-fund. So ultimately, you folks have a lot of decisions, but I think within limits, we can draft many of them. What I can't do is, you know, single out some groups for preferential treatment unless there's a legitimate policy sort of basis for that, because we do have things like the Common Benefits Clause. So I can't say Lamoille County will pay us a lower mileage-based user fee.
I think that would only be fair.
yeah.
We don't have an interstate. I would say all of the counties without an interstate should get a lower
They
rate.
begin with W. They're also lower.
So, you know, that doesn't narrow out Lamoille County, but that does, you know.
Yeah,
I think we should go through this. I would say in what had just articulated, in some respects, when we had Virginia here, they struggled with that. Virginia said if you have mileage that's over 25 miles to the gallon, they make adjustments so you're for your payments. If you're under 25, you were in a place, and Virginia particularly sticks out to me as a place that tried to make adjustments to base upon mileage, tried to be fairer to people, to be as equitable, and none of these systems are going to be perfect. But, you know, I would hope that our overall goal, at least to start this, is how do we set ourselves on the path to get to the fairest system we can that meets the needs of the agency and meets the needs of Vermonters to not end up with potholes in all their communities. And so why don't we go through this, because by the time we get through this, it will be lunchtime.
yeah.
Oh.
And I will try to get you there on time. So turning to the language that you have in front of you, like I said, this is an initial draft. So I've been working with Patrick on identifying potential changes and potential issues with the language. The House is considering it. What I'm going to do for you is flag the same things I flagged for the House when I walked through it with them last week. They've looked at this once and will be coming back to it this week, just like you will. And then presumably they'll have something in their T-bill that they'll send to you, and then you'll be able to work on further. So,
and I would say at this point, what I have talked to Damien about, what I have talked to people about, is if it was the will of this committee to go beyond this, to move more towards a system for everyone, knowing that you can't put that in place. It will take 2 or 3 years if we went at breakneck speed to do this. What are the things that we would have to do to set ourselves up to look to the future, to move towards that system, and put that on the table for discussion?
So what this bill does is it adds one section which creates a new chapter 43 in Title 23, which would be the mileage-based user fee chapter. This is the same as we do for gas and diesel tax. They each have their own chapter. It states that the purpose of the chapter is to impose the mileage-based user fee for battery electric vehicles, battery electric vehicle pleasure cars. That's approximately equivalent to the average amount collected by the state in fuel tax revenue from the use of non-plug-in electric vehicle pleasure cars, and the combined amount of the electric vehicle infrastructure fee and fuel tax revenue collected by the state for the use of plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Right off the bat, I want to highlight for you that those two amounts are not actually closely equivalent right now. And so you may want to tweak that language. And the folks who understand the numbers better can explain that to you. But my understanding is that because of the way that the infrastructure fee and fuel tax revenue relate for plug-in hybrid vehicles, their average amount is different than the average amount paid for a driver of an internal combustion engine vehicle. I should just get comfortable saying ICE. We can all start talking in that nomenclature. So 4302 creates the definitions. Account manager would be someone, a third party that the agency or department contracts with to administer and manage the mileage-based user fee. annual vehicle miles traveled, total number of miles that a vehicle is driven during the mileage reporting period, which is the 12-month period. And we'll get to what that actually includes. BEV is a battery electric vehicle. Mileage-based user fee is the fee charged for the annual vehicle miles traveled. The mileage-based user fee rate is the per mile usage fee. Mileage reporting period means the time between annual inspections or the time between the most recent annual inspection and a terminating event. Terminating event means either the registering of a battery electric vehicle in a different state. So you take your Vermont vehicle, you've moved, you register it in your new state, that's your terminating event. Or it's a change in ownership or lesseeship of the battery electric vehicle. So your lease ends, that's your terminating event. You trade your car in, that's your terminating event, etc. The one thing we missed in here, which should be in the next draft, is the termination of your registration. So your vehicle is in a crash and gets totaled, you can terminate your registration at that time. Your vehicle is no longer roadworthy and you're taking it off the road, you can terminate your registration. Your vehicle is being converted to a farm vehicle. And that was one other thing that you may want to consider is registration for highway use as opposed to farm use. We can talk about ways to deal with things like that. The 4302 is the section where you assess and calculate the rate. So it directs the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles to calculate and assess a mileage-based user fee within 14 days after the conclusion of the mileage reporting period. And then as soon as practicable after that, to mail to the registered owner or lessee a statement of the amount of the fee. And as a reminder, last year we updated the definition of mail to include electronic mail or other digital notice. So if you have a digital account with DMV in the future, things like that. And then this is in addition to any other fees and taxes imposed by this title. This somewhat future-proofs this, because if you have both a fuel tax and a mileage-based user fee on a plug-in hybrid at some point in the future, this will cover that. Okay. And it allows you some flexibility to decide how to implement those things. The payment of the fee, so there are two options here. The first is to, within 45 days after the mailing date of the mileage-based user fee assessment, just pay the full amount, similar to the way you pay your registration fee. The other option is to enter into an agreement with the commissioner to pay either in quarterly or monthly installments. So for folks who don't want to pay, let's say the full $154 if they drove 11,000 miles at the proposed rate, all at once, they could break that out into 4 quarterly installments or 12 monthly installments. The calculation is proposed in subsection C at a 1.4 cents per mile rate. And then the number of miles traveled would be equal to the difference between the mileage shown on the odometer at the end of the mileage reporting period and the mileage shown at the beginning of the mileage reporting period. The subsection D here is the inflation adjustment that was proposed. You'll notice it does not have a cap on it. So if the NHCCI went up by 17%, it could go up by 17%. It does have a floor. If the NHCCI is flat or goes down, the fee does not adjust. So we keep the fee flat. So it doesn't, so in other words, your fee can't go down from year to year. That again is a policy choice. This is the initial proposal from the agency here. So you can have it adjust up and down. Frequently we've put in floors in our adjustments, but there's nothing that says you have to do that.
even if the price of well, okay, I guess it wouldn't be.
It's not tied to the price of electricity. So
Well, let's
that's,
say the price of electricity, like with the TIB fund, if the price of gas goes way up or diesel, whatever. Wherever the fuel is of note, it goes up, it slightly goes down a little bit, the cost on the tax, is that correct?
Only if it hits the ceiling.
But if it doesn't go down, if the price goes way up further, and so
I'd have
this
to look
is-
at how the TIP fund is structured.
We-
I'm not.
I think it would be nice.
Maybe it's a
and-
Logan.
Well,
Yeah.
what we'll do is we'll get people in here to talk about TIM in that piece.
Yeah.
I, later in the week have also asked that, and that's not on this subject, that we run through all of the programs and exactly how they run for the towns.
Okay.
So, a little bit of, go back to the basics. Did you get that? Thank you. Thank you. We'll have a day in here where we buff up on all of what we do. What? And,
That's funny.
And you'll see that under exemptions, there's a placeholder there. Just because as we were working through the initial draft, we weren't sure what exemptions would make sense in the initial draft, and that becomes a policy choice. So we talked about off-road diesel being exempt versus on-road diesel. So there are options here for you to put in exemptions. There may need to be an exemption for federal vehicles, et cetera. So,
And we're going to have trucks, if we don't already.
right, so this is battery electric pleasure cars.
I understand, but at some point, I
At some
think we
point,
need to.
Yeah, at some point you could expand it to all motor vehicles. You already have battery electric and plug-in hybrid trucks
Mhm.
that are on the road. And that technology is obviously evolving too. And so these are all policy considerations. So section 4303, and what I want to say is from this point on, this language was modeled on the gas and diesel fuel tax. And as you look at this, you should take into consideration that the gas and diesel fuel tax is a tax on the distributors. So you're talking about a relatively small number of entities that are delivering a relatively large amount of fuel versus the mileage-based user fee where you have a large number of taxpayers and relatively small amounts. So one thing that I've been looking at with the agency at this point is, are there ways that it might make sense to change this language to reflect that reality? And this is something that the House is going to look into more. So this may change significantly before you see it again. But this would require the inspection mechanic to report the mileage shown on the odometer in the manner required by the commissioner. And then upon the occurrence of a terminating event, requires the owner or lessee to report the mileage at the time of the terminating event in the manner required by the commissioner. So for a vehicle sale, that's already done on the odometer disclosure. But there may be other requirements. For example, if your vehicle is in a crash that totals it, and the registration is terminated, how do you report your mileage then? But this leaves discretion for the commissioner to set up options at that point. Failure to file reports or pay the fee when due. So the first piece here is a $10 late fee for failure to file a report when it's due. The second is interest and penalties on failure to pay the actual fee when it's due. So remember, the reports are the odometer disclosure, the inspection report, etc. And then, so the failure to pay the fee when due would accrue interest at 1.5% per month, so 18% per year. That's the maximum statutory interest rate on the amount that remains unpaid. And then also a 5% penalty for every 30 days that it remains unpaid, up to a maximum of 25%. This is based, like I said, on the tax penalties. So
on tax penalties to,
gas and diesel fuel. So this is based on the way we penalize failure to pay your taxes that are due on that.
but this falls on the individual.
Right.
Those fall on somebody that is paying at the pump in a business that is doing that.
Right.
And so if I have a gas station, they pay $10.
So what it actually comes down to is it's the distributors who are supposed to be filing the reports and paying the amount due. So it's not actually assessed at the point of sale, as I understand it. It's assessed when it's distributed.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the pieces around this that it may make sense to look at the different ways we address these payments here. For example, there's, penalties for things like sales tax and gas tax, et cetera. And we have a different set of penalties for failure to pay your registration fee, failure to pay your license fee, which we were just looking at in the motor vehicle bill, where, for example, if your payment doesn't go through for your registration gets suspended until you pay that fee.
But there's not a late fee?
I don't think so. I have to double check, but it may make sense to compare these things and then consider what makes the most sense and whether it's one or the other or something in the middle.
I worry about this when you compare it to and it's people that are doing the wholesale. We must get big checks from big, this is, if I've got all 500,000 to 800,000 vehicles that are out there doing this, it may administratively be a nightmare to collect $10.
They're doing it every month.
So there's an administrative cost that
Yeah.
comes with this too, if you're tracking late fees, et cetera. But this is also, it's also, just to put in the other piece of this is a different payment system.
I get it,
So,
but it
yeah.
just, immediately what goes up in my head is even worse collecting $10.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
It's a different payment system than what, like, so.
then our
DMV
registration system, so you don't pay at 12 monthly installments for your registration, for your license.
But the system in that you're sending it to DMV would be the same. It'd just be, you would do it quarterly or monthly instead of.
That's a better question for the agency, how they
Because that would
envision this
be,
being
because I would
implemented.
think we
but-
would compare it more to DMV fees structure, so it'd be interesting to see that comparison.
Right, and so my point here is not to tell you which is better,
Sure,
but
yeah.
just to
No,
highlight
it's
that
just-
this is different from how we collect
This is
late payments on other
this is
DMVs.
designed with questions for people that are not at this table to explain to us why they chose this and versus something else.
And, yeah, and this is something that, again, full disclosure, I've been discussing with Patrick, as we've been looking through this as, does this make sense or not?
Yeah.
So, and obviously the ultimate decision is up to you, but we've been looking at the different mechanisms and discussing where some of the language came from in the initial proposal. And, that's the way to think of this is your first draft. So there is also 4306 in here provides for suspension of registration, or refusal to renew if you haven't paid your fees, which would be similar to what we have for registration right now. If you don't pay your registration fee, as the commissioner discussed, I think last week, if you don't make good on that bounce check or that late payment, within 30 days, they'll suspend your registration. So, section 4307, again, this is something that, it requires keeping and retaining records for a period of not less than 3 years and allows audits. Again, with, the tax system where you're talking about relatively large amounts, this is something we commonly do. There's a question of whether this makes sense for the annual fees. It's something for you to look at more closely. It seems like this may again be something where the records and this is something, again, I've been discussing with Patrick, the records are likely already to be with the DMV, the odometer disclosure, the inspection. The only one where there's a question is what happens when the registration is terminated, but that's something where you can provide a process for estimating or getting the closest odometer reading. You know, if the vehicle's not recoverable, you know, then you may have to set up something where the commissioner can estimate. But there, you know, just considerations, there can be limited instances of vehicle fire where the odometer is destroyed. You know, that allows you to cancel your registration for that vehicle. That would be a terminating event. At that point, how do you estimate that mileage?
Hopefully we never have to.
Hopefully you never have to, but it is.
Actually have, for the first time in my life, this fall, I've seen 2 vehicle fires.
Yeah.
One on the interstate, when the day we met in December, driving home, a car on the way home. I think you saw the same car. And then I saw a school bus about a month ago in the Williston, park, in in Williston at the, parking lot. And all on fire. It was like, wow.
Okay, well, I guess we do need to come up with a plan then, dang. Okay.
I had never seen one before in my whole life, and then I've seen 2 in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a possibility.
Can we just say you don't pay the tax? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think honestly, like, if it's you, we don't charge you the tax from the difference between your last payment to when your vehicle burned. Like,
Right.
I don't know why we gotta petty pitch someone who just lost a car, I guess.
So these are policy choices for you.
Okay.
You know,
The DMV commissioner angle, we can have them decide what they wanna do.
right, you know, these are things where, as we've been going through, we've been identifying potential gaps and points where, you know, with that, the records are likely to be with DMV, unlike with the gas tax, where, you know, the state doesn't keep the inventory and the invoices for, you know, a gasoline distributor. So they need to keep their records in case there's a question about whether their tax returns were accurate. This is a little bit different scenario. So in 4308, this sets out powers of the commissioner. What I should highlight before I go through this is with the audit and late payment provisions in there, there is an appeal system that's set up based on the way appeals are done for those taxes versus the way appeals are done if your registration is suspended. Again, depending on how you structure that, some of the language in this section for the powers of the commissioner would be unnecessary if you structure it more like the registration appeals rather than the tax appeals, and I'll get to that. So the general authority is to administer and enforce the section or the chapter. It gives the commissioner rulemaking authority, allows the commissioner to prescribe forms, to contract with an account manager, to, with the approval of the governor and the Secretary of Transportation, enter into reciprocal agreements with the District of Columbia, Canadian provinces, and other states to provide for reciprocal enforcement of the mileage-based user fee. This language in here could probably use a little bit of a adjustment just to reflect the way the mileage-based user fee is, again, it was based on the tax law. And we have reciprocal tax law language that's out there, but there may be some ways we can refine this to make it reflect the fee. And the idea with this is that eventually you would, one, be able to allow for other entities in the agreement to use our courts, and we can use their courts to collect unpaid fees when people move. And it would also, once you get to the point where you can geofence, allow you to apportion mileage-based user fees based on the state. So if you get to that point in the future, understanding that there are all sorts of policy considerations around privacy, et cetera, this would potentially allow you to apportion fees the way we do for commercial trucking, where under the international registration plan. And so then 5 and 6 here allow the commissioner to hold hearings, take depositions, administer oaths, compel attendance of witnesses, subpoena records. This is stuff based on the tax appeals, where if someone is appealing their taxes, the commissioner can subpoena their records as part of an audit, et cetera. And then the same with C and D. They include penalties of perjury and allows the commissioner to use the courts to compel attendance of witnesses or the subpoena of records. This may not be necessary if you structure this more like a registration fee than like a tax in terms of how the appeals are done. Proceedings to recover unpaid amounts, 4306. A is a civil enforcement action, which basically allows you to go to court to collect unpaid fees. Yeah, sure.
Are the unpaid fees for that owner, or are they just, do they have to get paid by somebody? So like if you register every year on July 1st, but you get rid of the car on June 30th, who did those? You sell it to the new person has to pay the tax?
No, it's the owner who owed the tax. So the owner for
If they're not filing a new registration, they'll.
Yeah, so if they've terminated, so let's say, I was the owner of an electric vehicle under this.
Yeah.
What this allows is I had, let's say 20,000 miles and I don't pay the fee on that.
Well, no, but my question is like, if you don't know what the miles are for that year because you haven't had an inspection, like your registration inspection kind of lines up. So like a week before the inspection, you sell it.
Then there's an odometer disclosure when you sell. And based off that odometer disclosure, your fee is calculated. And then if I don't pay that fee, this allows the state to take me to court to collect that fee. Okay. That's what A does. It doesn't go on to the new owner.
Right.
They're gonna pay from that odometer disclosure forward.
Okay.
Are there any case law from the other states we've talked to about loss of revenue from people moving out of state and just saying the hell with it? I'm not. Does it follow, in other words, would it follow them to the next state and be reciprocal, in other words?
So that's what the language about entering into reciprocal agreements was intended to address. So you could enter into reciprocal agreements with other states as this goes along, allowing them to enforce their amounts due in our state and us to enforce in their state. And then also potentially to apportion. I don't know of any cases right now, and I don't know what the experience is in the other states. That would be a better question maybe to ask them to comment on what their experience has been, but this is still fairly new, so I'm not sure how much experience there is to go on with this.
I'm trying.
You go.
Yeah, so I don't think we're gonna answer this question, but I think at some point we should talk about how right now, when you pay for gas or electricity, you pay for it in advance of using it. And this system has people paying after they use it. And it's just different because sometimes you just have money for a couple of gallons of gas and I'm concerned about making sure that folks are able to pay after they've consumed it. It's just a different mindset.
Well,
So
it occurs to me in this, this is all based on exact mileage usage. And in all of the other states, what they do have had is you can start the year and pay a blanket amount if you don't want to go through any of this, and you just pay a blanket amount ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like that, and you aren't bothered with any of this. And I could see, but that's a different mindset.
right.
And I think most of the states that we looked at had a number that they set.
That's scary.
Yeah, but that leaves it to an individual's choice.
Yeah, and the more I think about it, even though I heard Patrick say that they were trying to get people to join, so they had a low cap, but I think a higher cap makes sense to me at this point, because administrative ease, it would be, if I was the commissioner of DMV, I'd want people to pay up front. I would take a discount to get the money up front and get one lump sum than trying to do, monthly billing. It's just like other things. If you pay up front, you get a discount. So I think there's a value in that, especially as we're doing it.
Hawaii did a base amount, Virginia does that.
Right.
But
his argument was that they weren't mandatory, so they were trying to encourage people. But I think there's administrative savings that should be calculated into that.
Well,
why you want to do it.
I'm not
In addition,
disagreeing with you. But this doesn't contemplate a flat fee at the beginning. I personally think that there's some people that instead of going through all this might say, even though it was a higher price,
Yes,
that they might
Yeah.
upfront say, I'm gonna pay.
yes.
I probably would.
I would be one of
Depends
those.
on how
people.
high it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
And with that system, there's no truing up at the end, your flat fee. is
yeah, your flat
fee, yeah.
fee's your flat fee.
So my worry is, and I shouldn't be saying this because I'm one of those guys, I would pay the flat fee, and I drive like 24,000 miles a year.
Yep.
I'd be
but,
making out
you
with
know,
the bandit.
But how many are those? You're kind of a
It
unicorn.
might be an exception there, but
But-
there's a few.
But we.
Yeah, no, there are.
I
What's
think
the
that
cost
may
then?
be something we just wanna talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, we probably know, we know how many of those, like, if we set it at 15,000 miles, how many people do 25? How much are we losing there versus the administrative benefit of just making it?
Well, yeah,
One payment up front.
and to do that, you have to do a lot of driving out of state where you're not.
Right.
Well, and, where we set the fee, we might say it's blank above.
Yeah.
And, whatever.
One other thing about, I forgot what my other point was gonna be. Okay, I forgot.
Okay. Subsection B allows for tax lien, essentially. This is again a question of, do these amounts, so there's a question here of whether the amounts are big enough to warrant pursuing a tax lien.
Yeah.
Because that costs money too. So that's the only question that was raised on this is, again, this is designed around when you could put a lien on, like, for a large amount of unpaid taxes, it might make sense. But does it make sense if, you're talking about $175 plus interest? And then C allows for private collection agencies. So this would be an instance where, the rates past due after a certain point, it would allow the commissioner to use private collection agencies. My understanding is we're getting a little more information from DMV on whether and to what extent they already work with private collection agencies and so forth. 4307 allows for judicial review. This is an appeal from the commissioner's decision. at some point in here, you need to have some sort of due process if there's a dispute over the fee. The question is, what's the policy question for all of you is how much process do you want? This proposes an appeal to the commissioner, followed by a final appeal to Superior Court. The question is whether maybe it's just an appeal to Superior Court or some other process. And one thing that we can do as we move forward is get you information on what the appeal process looks like for some of the more administrative decisions like registration fees, et cetera. If there's a dispute over that with the DMV currently, just so you can compare and contrast and make an educated decision. And that's all I've got. So that's the end. And as things get updated upstairs, I can provide you with additional updates on that, and so forth.
I remember my question. Can you remind me about the rules? You can't drive a vehicle here registered in another vehicle, in another state. So if you were living in Massachusetts and then moved to Vermont, you couldn't keep it registered in Massachusetts or have like your in-laws keep it registered in Massachusetts to avoid this fee if you had an EV. That's against the law now, right?
Yeah, when you become a resident here, you're supposed to register your car here. I can't speak to
If the people,
Yeah.
well, I met a
Yeah.
constituent talking about the inspection the other day, and they said, well, yeah, my car is registered in another state because it can't pass inspection in Vermont, so I just have my in-laws register it. And so I don't know how common that is, or how you even try to enforce that. It just looks like another car from Massachusetts, but.
Yeah, so I mean, you're supposed to register your car here. It becomes a bit of an enforcement issue. I am aware of folks who have gotten ticketed in other jurisdictions when they haven't registered their car there. I don't know the extent to which that's happened in Vermont.
So they would just know
but
somehow,
it's-
like, we know you live here, so how is your car registered in another state? You know?
So the example I'm familiar with was an individual who had moved to the District of Columbia, and their car was parked on the street, and after 6 months, they got a ticket on their window because they passed the
Noticed
deadline.
that
And
I've been there, yeah.
the cops who came down the street,
Right, like, I've seen this car
You
for
know,
6 months. Yeah.
right?
And there's a possibility that a constituent like Andy's talking about, it's being registered in another state, he could be driving his in-law's car.
Well, that's what it basically,
That's
that's
what
what
it
they
is.
said they were doing, like, the in-laws have it, they're like, just keep registering in Massachusetts until I can afford a better car, because I can't get it inspected here, so.
Yeah, and there, you get into other issues too, of like whose name is the car in.
And it's not
You have-
Massachusetts, it's just another state that
Yeah.
doesn't have inspections.
You have college students who are living here part of the year, but not permanent residents.
Right.
And so there are some questions, and, but we can look at those penalties too, if you'd like.
Yeah.
But I'm not the best person to answer questions about how that gets
No, I just,
enforced or the extent to which it gets enforced.
that discussion was sufficient.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
It looks like lunchtime.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Perfect.